and Amy, and we suspected the issue of the Clinton reign, 8 years during the 90s, would come back to be a relevant discussion point in this election, and it has, all of it. Hillary Clinton likes to tout the economy's performance under her husband. She doesn't like to tout her husband's performance as president of the United States in terms of his personal conduct. And this continues to be an issue. There was an exchange, well, not an exchange, but Chelsea Clinton suggested that discussions of her father's indiscretions was a misdirection play, and Juanita Broderick, who has accused President Bill Clinton of raping her, fire back on Twitter that her father is a sexual predator and her parents are not good people. One of the other individuals who had made accusations against Bill Clinton back in the 90s is Kathleen Willey. And again, for people of a certain age, you may remember bits and pieces of this. You may not remember the full story. You may not have been alive for when this all transpired, but you're of age to vote. And so that's why some of these issues are relevant. And certainly Hillary Clinton has made the case that Donald Trump's full life is relevant. So I would suggest hers is as well. One of those stories is the story of Kathleen Willey. She wrote a book about what happened to her called Target, Caught in the Crosshairs of Bill and Hillary Clinton. And we're pleased to be joined by former volunteer aide to President Bill Clinton, Kathleen Willey. Miss Willey, thank you for joining us. Appreciate it.
My pleasure, Dan and Amy. Good morning.
Good morning. So why don't we start with, just the story, your recounting of the story that brought you to national prominence with respect to President Clinton, because of what I said previously, that, a lot of people remember bits and pieces or perhaps don't remember it at all. And so why don't we kind of establish that foundation? What happened to you vis-a-vis President Clinton?
Well, briefly, in November of 1993, the Monday after Thanksgiving, I went to see him. I went to work, and I asked to see him. My husband was in an extremely difficult financial situation that could have possibly led to disbarment and maybe even criminal charges. And we were in a real crisis mode, and we had sat down with our children and told them about what was going on. And I told my family that I was going to go to Washington on Sunday and ask to see the president, who was a friend. He was a friend of ours, if he could help me find a paying job that I could no longer volunteer.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but just a quick aside. You were friends. Your husband had raised a lot of money for his campaign in 92,
yes.
Right? Okay.
Well, they started Virginians for Clinton, which was...
Yes, we started Virginians for Clinton, and we gave them office space in our law offices. And so we were very active in that campaign. We did raise a lot of money for him. At the time, it was a lot of money. And we attended all of the inaugural events. I helped plan the inaugural in Washington, all those events. And so, like I said, he was a friend. And so I had no problem. I just didn't consider it, irresponsible or inappropriate to ask to see him for a few minutes. So I did. They fit me in, and I went to see him. I was very upset. I had not been able to locate my husband all day long. Office couldn't find him. Nobody could find him. So by the time I got into the Oval Office, I was pretty upset. And we were sitting there. I was sitting at his desk, and he said, you're very upset. Would you like to go get back to my little kitchen and get a cup of coffee? And I said, well, sure. I didn't see anything wrong with that. And we went back there, and he gave me a cup of coffee, and he said, let's go sit in my little study here. We can have more privacy. And I found out later that was the study where he and Monica used to meet. Didn't know it at the time. But anyway, so my time was short. I told him as much as I could in a short amount of time. While I was there, he asked a few things about the social office where I worked, and there had been some problems there that he had heard about, and he asked about those. And so it was that kind of a conversation. And so I was the one who said, thank you for your time. I really appreciate it. If you could help me, I just really need help. And at that time, he was the best opportunity in town for me as far as getting a job quickly. And so I got up to leave, and I was heading towards the door that led back into the Oval Office. And the next thing I knew, he had me backed into a corner, hands all over me, whispering in my ear, trying to kiss me. And I was just so dumbfounded, and it was so unexpected. It was like an out-of-body experience. It was so surreal. I remember.
Well, what was he whispering in your ear?
What is he doing, huh?
What was he whispering in your ear? Do you remember?
I've wanted to do this since the first time I met you. Since the first time I saw you. That's what it was. Since the first time I saw you. And like I said, I mean, I was worried about my husband. I was worried about our situation. I was worried about my children were in college. I mean, all of this was going through I couldn't find him all day, and I just wanted to get out of there. And luckily, well, not at first, it wasn't lucky, but his aide, Andrew Friendly, banged on the door and said, "Mr. President, you have a meeting waiting." And I knew that they would fit me in, and I thought, oh, thank God, I can get out of here. It didn't bother him in the slightest. He wasn't in the least distracted. And I just kept thinking, should I slap him, or should I kick him, or should I knee him, or should I scream? I didn't know what to do. And so again, Andrew knocked on the door, and that distracted him for enough time for me to just get out of there. And I opened the door to the Oval Office. I went across the office. The door out to the reception area was across the room, and I just remember thinking, all of this was going through my mind, and I'm thinking, everybody knows this reputation. We've all heard about it, and what do I look like? And God, I hope there's nobody on the other side of this door that's going to see me in a condition like this. Because obviously, emotionally, I wasn't in really good shape either. And sure enough, I opened the door, and there stood Leon Panetta and Lloyd Benson and another one, Laura Tyson, I think was the name. And I just thought, good God, I just need to get out of here. And I just got out of there as quickly as I can. And the most tragic part, the story about the whole day, was that my husband took his own life that day. So we just had, insurmountable problems. This started on that day, and I'm still suffering from. It's been a long 19 years.
And now, after all of that transpired, you didn't turn around and run to the press or run to the police. It wasn't, correct me if I'm wrong, but it wasn't until you were subpoenaed to testify in the Paula Jones case that this all came to light.
Correct.
And so what was the decision there? I mean, obviously you're dealing with the suicide and the death of your husband, so that's traumatic, and I can understand where
that happened in '93, and my name came out. My name first appeared on the Drudge Report in the last day of July of 1997, and I had not told that. So I had no intention of going public with that story.
Why didn't you want to go public with it?
It's a bad story. Now, it's just a bad story. I didn't want to. I didn't want to tell it. I just did not want to tell it. I had helped get him elected. I was ashamed. I was embarrassed that I had. I realized that all of the stories that women had told were true, and I was one. I was the party faithful. I didn't want to believe them.
And so but then you wrote a book too about caught in the crosshairs of Bill and Hillary Clinton. How did Hillary Clinton begin an intimidation campaign against you? What did she personally do to you?
Once my name came out, all of the weird stuff started. And at first, I just couldn't, my brain would not let me think or believe that people in my country were doing these kinds of, I just wouldn't allow it. And the first thing that happened was I went out to my car. The thing to remember here is I moved from our family home where we raised our children in 1997. I hadn't been out here. I moved to a little house in the woods in the country that year in 97 in March. And the funny stuff started. I was outed in July, and it started after that. I am very hard to find. I am extremely hard to find. The area that I'm in has no paved roads, no sidewalks, no nothing. It's all unpaved roads. All of our homes are far apart. We're out here for one reason, and that's privacy. And that's why I moved out here, even though I didn't know that this storm was coming, but I was here. And so the first thing I noticed, I went out to get in my car one morning, and 3 of the tires were flat. And I looked at it, I thought, how did this happen? And I'm trying to remember, where was I the next day before? Was I in a construction area? And I got my car to the shop, and I was sitting outside. I'll never forget it. It was a beautiful fall day, and I was sitting outside in the sun waiting for them to fix my tires. And the owner of the shop came out, and he said, "Come here, I want to show you something." And they had the car up on a rack, and he said, "Somebody flattened these tires with a nail gun." And I'll never forget. He said, "Do you have any enemies?" And I just looked at him, and I just said, "What?" I said, "Are you sure?"
And then later your house was broken into, but they didn't steal any jewelry. Tell us what they took.
They took my 13-year-old cat, who never went far from home, disappeared. My German Shepherd, who never left my side, disappeared for 4 days, just into thin air. I was the really scary part. The really scary part was 2 days before my deposition in Paula Jones's case. I was out one morning, early in the morning, walking, and I had not yet met all of my neighbors yet. And a man was jogging towards me, and he stopped me, and he called my name, and he said, "Hey, did you ever find your cat?" And I said, "No, I didn't. I put signs up out here, with a picture of him, and a name. He had his name tag with his name on it, and my phone number, not my name, just my phone number." And he asked me if I ever found the cat, and I said no, and I still look for him. And he said, "Yeah, he was a really nice cat." And I said, "Do you have him? Have you seen him?" And he said, "No, he was a really nice cat." And that's when I knew there was something up. And then he said, "Did you ever get those tires fixed?" And then I really knew.
So,
and then the scariest part was he asked me about my children. My children were away at college in different cities. He asked me about them. He mentioned their names. He knew their addresses. And that's when I just started to really freak out. And I started backing up. I asked him who he was. I kept demanding to know who he was. And he just looked at me and he said, "You're just not getting the message, are you?" And previous to that, a private investigator had called my home and did something that they don't do. He warned me. He left an anonymous name, and he warned me. He said, "They're bad people out to harm you." And he eventually he eventually testified before Ken Starr's grand jury. So, I did not imagine these things. I found somebody roaming around under my house, under the deck of my home at 3 o'clock one morning. I saw his shadow from a light that was behind him by the door. These are all the things. I took my animals, my pets, to the kennel one day. I left town for about a week, and I was very careful not to talk about leaving town to anybody on the phone. I never announced that I was leaving until I let people know once I got there. And I no sooner got to my destination that the owner of the kennel called and said, "I just want to make sure that it's okay that I let your friends coming by to pick up your dogs and cats, and I just want to make sure it's okay for me to let her have them." And I said, "I don't know what you're talking about." And she said, shortly after you dropped them off, she called and said that that you had changed your mind, and she was going to come and pick them up. She was going to keep them. And I said, "Don't you dare let her have them. Call the police, and I'm going to call the FBI." Because at that point, I was a cooperating witness, and I had agents that I could call when these kinds of things happen. So she never showed up.
So with respect to all this, I mean, the story didn't become public until you were subpoenaed to testify in the Paula Jones civil suit.
My name didn't become public until July of 1993. And I was subpoenaed by Ken Starr the following, I believe it was January or February in 1998, after my deposition in Paula Jones's case.
Right. And so the point is to say you were reluctant to come forward. It wasn't something you were looking to do. And then
Exactly. I didn't come forward until I was subpoenaed.
And then the decision to write the book, was that sort of a way to also insulate yourself, to be more of a public name, a public figure, to detail this?
No, it was more to tell my story.
Okay.
Because so many horrible things have been said about me, and the other women too. And Amy, that was it was when I was editing that book, the hard copy of that book, is when somebody broke into my home and stole the manuscript while I was asleep upstairs.
So fast forwarding to this presidential election with Hillary Clinton now running again, and the issue being raised of Donald Trump's name calling of women and other sorts of past conduct with women, and now the possibility that Donald Trump will make more of Bill Clinton's conduct and Hillary Clinton's conduct by extension an issue. How do you react when women say, I don't care about Bill's past indiscretions, quote unquote, indiscretions? What would you say to those women?
This isn't about indiscretions, okay? This whole story is no longer about infidelities, indiscretions, girlfriends, sex, any interns, any of that. This is about a woman who is so greedy for power, and what she will do to stop anybody who gets in her way, and that includes all of us, and then some. I mean, I can tell you that I have spoken to women. I have a website, and I invited anybody who was assaulted or raped by him to please get in touch with me. If they wanted to go public, I would help them with it. If they wanted to be anonymous and just get the story off their chest, to talk to somebody about it that they've been carrying around for years, that they could do that also. And I have heard from a number of women who've told me horror stories about what has happened. And one of them was 12 years old at the time. And I don't. All of these stories I vet as best as I possibly can, and only one of them turned out to be, kind of a wingnut. The rest of them, most of them, have said you can tell my story, just remove any identifying information.
Have you spoken with Juanita Broderick or Monica Lewinsky?
Yes. No, I've never spoken to Monica. I do talk to Juanita, and I talk to Paula. I don't think I've ever talked to Jennifer. I've talked to Dolly.
Well, how many are there?
I need my scorecard. Yeah. I
have communicated with other women who have had these kinds of events. And one woman, told out in detail of it when he almost raped her when he was in Cambridge. And she was just a young teenager who just graduated from college. She was given that trip to England as a graduation present. She had a friend who lived in England, and she went to see her. And, they started touring England, and they went to Cambridge and ran into Bill Clinton and a friend of his, and he tried to rape her that night at a party.
And these stories,
not making it up.
And these stories go back to Bill and Hillary in Arkansas to fast forward to him as president.
Yes, one did. One woman is going to go public with her story this weekend.
Really? And what's the nature of her story?
Well, I'm not free to say. I mean,
Okay.
It's about an event that happened when she was working in Little Rock. She's going to tell her story this Saturday night on Aaron Klein's radio show.
Okay.
I know he's your opposition.
No,
but
it's fine.
She's going to tell her story on Sunday night, and I feel sure that he will probably write about it in Breitbart that evening. It'll be posted that evening, or certainly the next morning. She's got a very compelling story. One that really horrified me was she's grown now, but she was a young girl, 12 years old, and her father was working on one of Clinton's campaigns, and he started hitting on her when she was 12 years old, and it lasted for 2 years. And she said she never told her father. She was afraid to tell him. She was confused, and she did everything she could to try to stay away from him. Her father would take her to these campaign events because he thought it was a good lesson in political science for her, and he knew that she had an interest in it. And finally, she said that he quit the campaign, just up and quit the campaign one day out of nowhere. And she told me, I'm convinced that he finally realized what was really going on.
All right, Kathleen.
12 years old.
Kathleen Willey, the book, Target, Caught in the Crosshairs of Bill and Hillary Clinton. Kathleen Willey, thanks so much for joining us, your time. We appreciate it.
My pleasure. Anytime. Thank you.
And she joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.